Teachers of Reddit, what are your worst experiences with helicopter parents? Not a teacher, but I knew a guy in high school whose mom was like a dang Apache helicopter. She would hound teachers for any little thing that her son mentioned. She had most of the teachers scared or at least annoyed with dealing with her that her son, who was a decent guy actually, though obviously spoiled, never had to deal with a dang thing. His mom had him take all the easiest classes as well so that he would be valedictorian, which he ended up getting, because our school was retarded and didn't weight advanced versus remedial classes. My uncle was a biology teacher at our school and told me how she would call every day to make sure what his homework assignments were, when tests were, why he got marked tardy, etc. Insane. My mom used to read over my papers and say that they were utter crap, that they read like a retarded person wrote them sometimes. She'd do this while hitting me. She'd then sit down and slowly write out an essay that I was supposed to turn in, all the while telling me how much of a disappointment I was. When I turned it in, it would be obvious that she wrote it. She was a lawyer, so everything that she wrote sounded cold, detached, and very, very legal. Her version never followed the prompt. She'd get lost in the formatting. Noteworthy in that the formatting that she used was not the one that we learned in class. I'd usually get a C or D when I turned in her versions. One teacher even wrote, "Don't get your parent to write this crap," right next to a big red D. She'd then beat me and said that I was a freaking retard for getting such a low grade. Whenever I managed to write a paper without her interference, I'd usually get a B or an A. Teachers would compliment me on my writing. She never did, though. Not once. She did the same thing when I was typing my Eagle Scout report. No matter what I wrote, it would be crap. I even copied a similar project's report word for word, just replacing a few words where needed. Apparently that was crap too. This was a report that was basically already passed by the council, but it wasn't good enough for her. I remember crying a lot. Eventually, she just wrote it herself. My Eagle ceremony was 15 minutes. I didn't invite any of my friends. The badge is now collecting dust under my dresser. I've never bothered to get it out from under there. I love Scouts, but I am not at all proud of my Eagle rank. When I think back to my project, I don't think of helping little kids in a Title I public school. I think of the crap my mom used to do. It remains one of the worst experiences of my life. Anyway, that's the worst helicopter parent that I know. Dang. It felt good to type that out. Not a teacher, but great helicopter parent story. One time my assistant's mother called me to say that her son had overslept, and he would be late to work. Homeboy is 27 years old, and does not live at home anymore. WTF kind of person would rather call his mother than his own manager to say he'll be late? Not a teacher, but I went to WVU my freshman year. During orientation, the residency halls had meetings with the students and the parents, individually. The student meeting went well enough. The students seemed to be smart enough to figure things out and asked good questions. However, according to my mom, during the parent meeting a woman asked, "Who will do my daughter's laundry?" In middle school, I knew a kid whose mother was not only an 8th grade English teacher, but head of the entire English department. The kid was really nice and smart, but he also happened to be extremely dyslexic. I had her for English the period before he had her, and she would often have us watch movies in class on days that projects were due so that she could finish her son's project before the next class. Worst of all, when it came time for our little middle school graduation ceremony, all of the academic departments were giving out awards. Who do you think that B gave the English award to? Her dyslexic son. He really was a cool guy, but English was definitely not his strong subject, and he'd already won several awards that day. Try to imagine the sound of an entire auditorium of middle school kids sucking their teeth in unison. Massive amounts of respect to the teachers here. This is why I don't educate. I would totally lose my crap with some of these parents. I have an honest question, though. At the beginning of every school year, I write a letter to each of my kids' teachers. One is autistic with behavioral problems, the other has pretty severe asthma, and one is normal, but eccentric. I basically tell them, this is my kid, this is what's normal and what's not. If one can't breathe, call me. If the other won't stop screaming, call me. Basically a cheat sheet for what works and what doesn't. just to save on the trial and error. If I have questions or concerns, I'll volunteer in their class or elsewhere in the school, but I don't do it to hover. I do it to answer my own questions. Then if I still have questions, I'll ask them. Is that too much? Or does it actually help? I think most teachers would be thrilled to get that sort of email, as it shows open communication and a parent that is willing to work with the teacher for the good of the child. It's world different from a parent who shows up screaming that their precious snowflake only got a 90% on the last test and the teacher should change the grade since he or she obviously can't teach the material. As a college TA, I had one parent come in and demand that he see his son's grades. Yup, Asian. Son about 19. I told him about FERPA laws and that I indeed had no access to grades to begin with. He tried going above my head and ended up getting booted off campus since he harassed all the professors his son had classes with. Gotta love FERPA. Not a teacher, but I know someone who was required by his parents to call home every day or else apparently his mom would have nightmares when sleeping or something. He's been in college for over 2 years. I feel like you're my long lost brother. I'm not a teacher, but I remember my 5th grade teacher wanted to show us the first Harry Potter movie. Some mom claimed it supported witchcraft or something and that her child wasn't allowed to watch it. Anyways, our class ended up not watching it. That's a great way to make the other kids in the class hate your kid. My math professor mentioned the other day that last quarter he cancelled class once, on a Wednesday night. The Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. A parent reported him to the dean. Former rebellious high school kid here, and I am so stoked I grew up before some dumbass decided to start posting grades on the internet. It was a magical time. Parents couldn't get online and pull up an attendance report. Teachers were left the frick alone to do their jobs. World of Drumming was a class. Heck yeah, getting baked in the smoking lounge outside while rocking out to Geenra. The teacher in charge of the lunch period when I would do this fully knew what we were up to but was too lazy to care. The good old days when life was a breeze. Not a teacher. There was a 11-year-old boy in my grade 10 classes. He was also in the advanced math class. Every day, his mother would sit in his classes, follow him around and openly mother him in front of high school kids. This kid had absolutely no chances in making friends. It was actually quite depressing. I remember one of the teachers confronting the mother saying the boy needed space. The mother proceeded to complain that the teacher was marking him unfairly and why he didn't get bonus marks blah blah blah. I'm not a teacher, but I attend the University of Memphis. The dorms are single sex. There are enough helicopter parents that complain about their children having unsupervised visits with the opposite sex that I don't think this will change anytime soon. You also have to sign anyone in of the opposite gender when taking them in the building. I used to dress up as a girl to spend the night with my girlfriend. That was the night when Autumn was born. Classy lady. Hello fellow Memphian. Our dorm system is ridiculously easy to exploit. I've had girlfriends stay over weekends and no one knew. Anything is possible if you're not afraid to, you know, dress as a woman. Let's grab a Chinese sub sometime. This thread reminds me why I stopped teaching. I have a real big problem with keeping my mouth shut when people are hurting their kids. Not education related, but I lived with my 26-year-old, at the time, cousin and one of our friends, all young professionals. Swanky bachelor pad, only unit on the pool in a really nice complex. Then he got sick and had to get surgery, and his mom came to live with us, and stayed for freaking months. After he had already recovered, she'd cook his food, do his laundry, sleep in his bed with him, and nag at him the whole time. Her voice has two tones, high-pitched yelling and condescending yelling. She yelled at him for not being appreciative, not cleaning up the way she'd like, even though she cleaned everything, watching TV. Remember, he's 26. Playing video games, sleeping too much. I started dating a girl pretty seriously, and corned. See what I did there? Started bitching at me anytime we were together. I can't tell you how awkward it is to be an adult, watching a movie in your own den only to have your psycho aunt come home and start telling you it's inappropriate to have a girl stay the night. Eventually, she stopped living with us. I think my mom, who is awesome, had a talk with her, but she'd still visit from time to time. I had a few friends over for a party at one point and she showed up and tried to shut it down. claiming we would get evicted. The leasing staff were in attendance, and we were all adults. I moved out as soon as the lease was up. But dang, that apartment was a guaranteed lay. I actually moved into the mirror unit a year later. TLDR, my aunt is a C. During my student teaching, I had a student whose mother was the definition helicopter parent. He was supposedly gifted, so she made sure to inform us we were on an hour grading if he received anything less than an A. She would come in every morning and unpack his backpack for him. If she was there for lunch, she would spoon feed him. This was a third grader. Almost every year, no matter what book or theme I go with, I have at least one nutjob parent who thinks it is inappropriate for some reason or another. I had just finished teaching a unit on the Holocaust. I'm not one to coddle students, so we went to the museum and saw a lot of documentaries and read books and accounts that didn't really hide or sugarcoat anything. I was proud of how they handled it. Next, I started a unit on the Hunger Games. Parents tend to be afraid of any contemporary lit. So I sent home a note explaining the book and my justifications for teaching it over Christmas break and asked them to contact me immediately if there were issues. Nothing. So in February, I start the unit. A week or so into it, I had a parent come and say that he thought the book was too violent for his sons, both of whom were in my classes. I said okay, well, we just learned about the Holocaust, which was much more violent. And then he said, well, that's okay, because it really happened. Yes, reading about the mass murder of millions of people is just okay for the little snowflakes, but an allegorical fictionalized account of a dozen or so killings is too much? Really? Really? Funniest thing was that I saw one of his sons with the sequels during independent reading time later in the year. I hate parents. Not a teacher, but I work on staff at a community college, and the program I work for pays for students' tuition and fees when they're right out of high school. Needless to say, many parents I come across are helicopter parents. Not sure if this is my worst, but I think it's my most noteworthy moment with one of them. After explaining to a mother that her son had ignored repeated requests for information, hadn't completed financial aid paperwork he needed to complete, I began to tell her exactly what he needed to do. She responded by asking what she could do, explaining he just learned how to write a check last week. At that point, I told her, calmly, "Mom, perhaps it would behoove your son to take charge of his educational experience." Crickets. She hung up on me. I'm sure that I'm too late to not be buried, but a colleague of mine in my school has had the most helicopter parent I have seen in my 8 years of education. This mother, Middle Eastern descent in a 96% Caucasian school, felt that in first grade at each school and grade level should be voting for a child that was the voted master of their peers. She felt that he would one day be the president of the United States and that his early elementary public education should reflect so. She felt that he should be voted upon to rule the rest of the grade level, delegating responsibilities to his peers. Mind you, he had just turned 5 and had skipped kindergarten based upon parent request in spite of his kindergarten level formative assessment levels. She forced her child's teacher to have him present PowerPoints each month on complicated issues such as segregation and photosynthesis. She would come in on these days to videotape these presentations that were clearly done by her. She would keep him after school 3 times a week to make sure his reading points not only met what was expected, but was 10 times what was expected. She left the district this year with her children in search of a private school where a second grader could be voted as the master of all grades K6 to learn leadership of his peers. Bless her heart. Sounds like the kid is gonna have a bad time all the way till his 20s. Dang. This will so get buried, but still nice to get off my chest. I used to teach 10th grade in Holland, VMBO, Dutch system, and on parent teacher night I had a request to meet the parents of a kid I taught. Wasn't his form teacher, so kind of odd. Anyways, this kid is always super nervous, gets into fights a lot and is socially awkward, but still, good looking, so he gets away with it and is considered one of the popular kids. But as a grown up, I can see something is seriously wrong with this kid. So, parents walk in at about 9 in the evening and sit down. I ask them why they wanted to see me. I have 2 of the most angry parents in front of me, and if looks could kill I would have died right there and then. They sit down and throw a book report on the table. So, why did you give our son a 7.3 for this report, they ask. We grade from 1 to 10. I'm flabbergasted. Graded that report a month ago and have no idea what they are talking about. They obviously came prepared, ripping the report apart paragraph by paragraph. I try to explain to them that their son is only at VMBO level. In Holland, we have 5 levels of secondary education. He was at level 2. And by those standards he did a great job and they should be proud of him. They kept being angry at me, even after I explained then grading method and the SAT equivalent requirements which he clearly passed. They at it at $. Tried to tell me how to do my job and told me that I should make an exception for him and next time he handed in a report like this he should get a 4 out of 10. They were so mean and nasty and I really wanted to go home. It was almost 9:30 PM by then so I said well, okay. We'll discuss his next report together. Next day I looked the kid up and we bonded like heck. I had to keep a professional appearance but I so let him know his parents were douches. I literally saw him relax his muscles when we talked. I did inform our school psychologist about this. TLDR. Nervous kids' parents are freaking buttholes. This happened with a friend of mine at uni. He's 20, but his parents still buy him food, clothes etc. 2 AM the night before a 9 AM exam I get a call from a mate of mine about do I know where he is? His parents called him that evening and he hasn't answered etc. I told him that he had an exam in 7 hours. I had an exam in 7 hours. He's had his phone off all week and even when he doesn't he's a freaking tosser and never answers the thing. My best friend. I tell him he'll have locked himself in one of the lecturer's offices with a group of lazy idiots who done no work who we were tutoring. Great way to revise. But no, his parents haven't heard from him in 8 hours. So they get campus security to check every single room on both the university campuses. 6 hours after this he turns up to the exam and of course I was right. He was in this guy's office until 6 AM. One more time, he is 20 years of age. My friend, who is pretty smart, no issues, was labeled as special needs by his mom so that he could get extra time on tests. As someone who doesn't want to make the mistake of being a helicopter parent, sometimes the other parents around me make me feel like I'm a bad parent because I expect my son to be responsible for himself and his own decisions and schoolwork, age appropriately. I taught drama at a magnet middle school in an urban district. One mother convinced Principal Dickhead that she must accompany her child to every class to make sure the teachers were doing their jobs. The woman demanded a chair near her daughter, spent 90% of her time talking loudly on her cell phone, and spent the other 10% trying to force me to include her in the class activities. She must have been blowing Principal Dickhead, because her review of my teaching was used as my official evaluation for the year. She never held a job in her life, let alone was even remotely qualified to evaluate a teacher. I hold a master's degree in my field, and Ms. Thang is allowed to tell everyone that I'm okay, but don't make class enough fun. I left after that year. Late to the game here, but I have a student in 3rd grade whose father applies her chapstick for her, in front of all her friends. No good. No good at all. At the beginning of this school year, a parent of a high school junior emailed me and all of his son's other teachers to tell us to not bother him unless his kid is running the risk of not playing sports. So, this morning, I sent the kid to the office. I was told to write him up. The principal wasn't even there today, so it's not like he got in any real trouble. Well, Daddy sent me an email requesting a meeting. Daddy is a misogynistic pig. He hates women. By the way, I'm female. So, now I have to meet with this father who is a total dong sucker, and he'll make it seem like I'm being unreasonable because I won't hang around school until 6 o'clock in the evening to meet with him. This kid is going to flunk out of college because his professors won't talk to his father. I am a college instructor and I take great delight in informing parents that I am totally unable to talk to them about their student. FERPA, they get so pee. It's amazing. I can't imagine being a freshman, let alone older, and having my parents emailing my teachers to discuss my grades or homework. My mum was the science teacher in my elementary school and every year we had a science fair. Now I was very good at science and desperately wanted to compete, so my mum's boss insisted that she bring in outside judges so it'd be fair. Well, don't you know, I won first place fair and square, and now a week later a parent of a girl who barely turned in a project came in and tried to attack me and my mum because I had won. I'm a special education teacher and I have constant issues with parents that have forced the schools, through years and years of threatening legal action, to hold their children's hands and pass them through the system. Add ADHD learning disabilities make certain aspects of learning extremely difficult for children and can even affect life skills such as organization and memory. But when special education providers are forced to do almost everything for their students, learned helplessness becomes the norm. I believe special education teachers have such a high turnover rate not because working with students with disabilities is particularly trying or tough, but because the sheer amount of documentation and extra work you need to do to just fend off threats of legal action from parents. Any other frustrated special ed teachers out there? I had a student last year in class. He was a waste of a seat. He was lazy, manipulative, and arrogant. His mom was a single mom and based on our first contact, it was pretty clear she was going to be more trouble than help. By the end of the first 9 weeks, I already had a folder in my email just for emails from her. Despite being a helicopter parent, her son never improved. She'd give me the standard "we are going to study for the test on Tuesday over the weekend," and then he'd come in on Tuesday unaware that there was going to be a test, and then fail it. Naturally, he failed the first 9 weeks, and all heck broke loose. For the next 6 weeks, not a day went by that I didn't receive an email or phone call from her. Finally, right before Thanksgiving, I had her come in for a meeting. I showed her my failures log. I kept a log of day-to-day behavior of students who had chronic issues, and showed her what he'd been doing. She refused to believe it. Outright refused. After that, she transferred him out of my class and into another, with the exact same results. He had 4 English teachers his first 9th grade year. I hire for a summer camp, mostly college students. I hate when parents fill out the job application for their child, but one mom went way over the top when she wrote a 2-page single-spaced letter to me about all the reasons I should hire her son. When I was student teaching in a 3rd grade room, we had a mom that was so worried all the time. She was afraid he would choke on our Lego set. She was worried because he had been constipated. She was afraid he didn't make it off the bus in the mornings. She wanted us to help him make his Lunchable pizza every day. Constant emails and calls to the school. Worst part, she was making him so helpless. 9 years old and couldn't make a Lunchable pizza or mix his drink. I run a Glee club and the parents can be just awful. They always want their kids in the spotlight, and despite the fact that I'm only 20 years old and I'm just doing this as a fun project, I make pretty much next to nothing. They always complain about their kids not having enough solos, the show venues being too far away, and the sound quality being bad. These kids are on average 12 years old and it's a non-audition club. Seriously, just stop bringing your kids back if you don't like it. The worst part was when one expected their kid to be paid even though they're supposed to pay me. Sigh. During my student teaching, there was a huge issue in my school due to the overprotectiveness of a student's mother. The student had been sitting in class and her friend walks by and gives her a light "pay attention" silly smack on the back of the head. They both laugh. End of story. Jump forward a few days and the mother is in the principal's office with her daughter claiming she had a concussion from the smack. The daughter misses months of school, claims she had memory loss and now can't take test, etc. The kid who gave the smack is being blamed. The friendship is ruined, and the mother of the girl who was smacked is taking the smacker and the school to court. Mind you, this is the girl's senior year in high school. All ruined. Everything was eventually dropped and the girl who was smacked reveals it was fake. Turns out the mother had ripped into her for failing a test and the girl said something about getting smacked. The mother assumes her daughter has a concussion. Crap storm ensues. It should be noted that this girl was super nice and very smart. Just got caught in her mother's intensity. TLDR. Girl is convinced by her mother that she has a concussion from a light smack in the classroom. Shitstorm of a senior year complete with legal battle ensues. Beginning of 3rd year teaching. Still kinda unsure of self. Had a parent of Lil Susie come on in with Lil Susie to complain that she thought she'd gotten an A the previous semester, but report card had said B+. I looked back through, it wasn't even that close, 87ish, but after much berating I caved and made up some bull's justification for her Lil Susie honor student. My single biggest regret in my professional career, to this day. Fast forward 3 years to her senior year, and Lil Susie decides she isn't even going to take a 4th year of math, because she got her required 3 credits and didn't like math. She bitched to be accelerated, and then quit before calculus. The single saving grace was that directly after this incident a student I had a really good rapport with came to ask a similar question, was closer, but I was mad at myself still and told him it wasn't an A. Sorry buddy. He didn't complain. He didn't B. He just said alright, no worries. Just thought I'd check and went on his way. I made a promise to myself, and 3 years later that young man got the best goddamn college reference letter on the strength of humility and persevering that I've ever written. Not to mention he went on to take independent study calculus his senior year. Feels good, man. My clueless 8th grade English teacher was going to show us 300 because we were reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. He had no clue about it being rated R and the sex scene. Next day, we all came to class with that amazing feeling of the next hour I'm going to sit in class watching some chick ride a dong and a bunch of sweaty, half-naked buff dudes kick butt. What we got was a helicopter mom who decided to spend half the period lecturing us and the teacher about the sins of pornography. We figure her son, who is autistic, came home the previous day and went on about how excited he was to see his first ever rated R movie. When I was a senior, in high school a freshman girl had the worst helicopter mom. We were both on the swim team. The mom would come to every practice and sit in a chair she brought, and would come into the locker room. If we had team bonding stuff, go out for pizza, sleepovers, the mom was always there. She wouldn't allow her daughter to stay the night at anyone's house because she couldn't supervise. In my daughter's preschool, some mom got angry that the kids were learning the song Bar Bar Black Sheep and demanded it put too much emphasis on the color of a person's skin, so the teachers sang it Bar Bar Rainbow Sheep. They changed the wording back to normal. The dad of one of my 2nd graders frequently tries to sneak into the cafeteria to spoon feed his daughter her lunch. If she doesn't eat all of her food he packs it up in containers to take home. He'll also try to get other kids to give him their leftovers or have her ask others for their food. It's gross. He hangs around the school campus practically all day. He doesn't work very much to make sure she and her younger sister are okay. The cord is definitely not cut with this one. She can't do anything without mom or dad because they keep her attached at the hip when she's not at school. It creeps me out a bit. I shoo them away whenever I can. Many years ago, I was subbing in a bad class. This girl threw a chair at another classmate. I sent her out because she was just out of control. As I was going to lunch, her parents were waiting with the principal, and I had to talk to them. Her parents were just absolutely delusional about her, saying that she was such a great student that would never do anything like that. I was just flabbergasted. I'm just not surprised that many of these schools have so many problems, or that people don't want to hire these kids. I've seen everything. Whenever I hear politicians talk about education reform, I just roll my eyes. They are freaking clueless. You know what? I have a second story. Sorry, I taught for a year at a private school because I used to live in an area with a crappy job market. I had an autistic student in my 8th grade class who functioned at about a 3rd grade level. He was in my regular class for no other reason than the fact that his father paid tuition to this small private school, so he felt like we were at his command. Keep in mind, I have no special ed certification. I'm a general ed English teacher. I had to prepare an entirely different curriculum for him, and yet include him in the class. I worked harder on this one student than I did on the rest of the class, so very unfair to the rest of the students, but I'm only one person. So I started cutting back to be fair to the rest of the class, who also had parents paying tuition and who were entitled to a quality education. Guy emails me almost hourly wanting daily reports of his kid's progress. Ain't nobody got time for that, so I ignore them. I email him weekly, maximum. He asks me to give his son harder homework, and that he would help him complete it. I do so. The kid turns in work that shows he had no idea what he was doing and got no help from home. So I go back to the regular level of work. Dad freaks out. Then he starts working on getting him into a high school. A few people come to observe him in class and ask me about his levels. Dad honestly thinks that his son can pass the literacy test. This is in Canada, where students have to pass this test to graduate from high school. Nothing is worse for a kid than placing him in an environment where he cannot succeed. This student had talents and skills and was an overall nice kid, but he was never going to pass that literacy exam. So, I was honest and frank with the observers. I did nothing more than verify what they saw with their own eyes anyway. I got thanked for this, and for all the extra work I put into his child, by getting harassing emails even after I had resigned my position at that school and well into the summer. I feel for him in a way. I'm sure it isn't easy being a parent to a special needs child, and I know he was in denial when it came to his abilities and limitations, but is that really the teacher's fault? I worked as a leasing agent assistant property manager years ago in the 5 College area of Western Mass, and dealt with very wealthy parents of very spoiled college-aged kids. I was that age myself at the time, but married with a child. We had 4-bedroom apartments right near Amherst College. The apartments were crappy as heck, just really ugly and never clean. The kids were always putting holes in walls, etc. Well, one weekend this apartment of 6 dudes had a big freaking party. They lit the apartment on fire. Fire engines, ambulances, the whole thing. The guy whose room the fire was in was the son of a surgeon and a corporate attorney. Mom and dad arrived the next day in hysterics. They practically carried their little boy out of the model apartment we had them stay in that night. Mom came running to me screaming her head off that the apartment wasn't safe, that it was electrical, etc. After investigation revealed this dude was smoking crack and got totally wasted. He fell asleep, passed out and knocked over a candle. I was there when our attorney called his folks to tell them what happened. They immediately asked how much they cut a check for over $20,000 in damage. Prepaid us for the following year of rent. No punishment, no questions, just a bunch of cash and shush money. Dude returned to the apartments, subsequently failed that year of school and left well before his year of rent was paid. I applied the prepaid balance to a single mom's rent and she was able to live rent-free for 4 months. Student transferred from an obscure state college to a big state university where I used to teach. Student took transfer exams that unequivocally showed he needed to repeat several of our core courses. The next day, his father called me up. The conversation went like this. "Father, you must have made a mistake. My son already passed these classes with good grades at his previous school. I understand that, but we have certain standards here, and your son's performance on these exams demonstrated that he lacks some important knowledge and skills necessary to continue with our curriculum and earn a degree here. Father, this is unacceptable. I'll call the governor and tell her that all you state schools have to get your act together. Why can't you all have the same standards? I have one question for you. Why did your son transfer from the state college to our university? Father, to get a better education. Exactly. Father : I was a straight A student in my freshman year of high school and beginning of sophomore year. About halfway through sophomore year I received a B in my English class, and my father was P. He gave me an ultimatum. I was to write an essay to him on how I would not slack off and get any more B grades. You know what I did? I thought, frick that bulls. I've done my work the best I know how and didn't write the essay. I went to sleep that night expecting another bulls lecture in the morning. Boy was I in for a surprise. He comes down to my room. I was kept in the basement while the house was being remodeled at 3 in the goddamn AM, and yells at me, "Say goodbye to all your little friends. You've just lost the computer." But the next day he took the keyboard from the computer and locked it up in his safe. If I was to need the computer for homework, I would be monitored while I completed what I needed to do, and then it was back to the safe for the keyboard. This lasted about 6 months, through the summer even, until I started my junior year. I flunked a class that year, had about a C average, and almost killed myself because of all the pressure that was on me. This was over 1 B that I got in my sophomore year in high school. As a young adult now in college, I'm afflicted with all sorts of anxiety problems, constant depression, and adult ADD, which of course I've always had, but was recently diagnosed that I'm on several medications for. I hate college. I feel like I'm just there for my parents' sake and that I'll always in some way be their property with their expectations bearing down on me. Thanks, Dad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.